polluters be held accountable for all the violations of human and nature rights. So that's going to be really totally awesome. Unfortunately, MVP last month, actually earlier this month, announced they asked for in-service permission from the Federal Energy Regulatory Agency, FERC. So they want to be in service by early June. It was May 23rd, but guess what? There was a rupture just right after they did that. And so now they're a little bit behind, good, and hopefully they'll never happen. But they've asked for this to be done by early June before they've even completed their safety consent agreement. So I will include a link to help us tell FERC to deny MVP's request and a lot of toolkit actions you can take. And as I've also mentioned, and I will include this link, the Southeast North Carolina and Virginia area have been facing an onslaught of way too many methane gas expansion projects, thanks to Duke and Dominion Energy, with between the Mountain Valley Pipeline, the MVP Southgate, Mariah LNG facility that we heard about from Jason a few months ago, Transco's Southeast Supply Energy Pipeline, and Dominion and Duke's T15 Reliability Pipeline, these terrible names that they have. And I will share a link with more information on all those. And I will also share an awesome article by Deborah Kushner, who is in Virginia and has a beautiful newsletter and that she writes about what's happening with the Mountain Valley Pipeline. And this is an article about a tireless and exemplary protector. It's really great. And so one of those articles, one of those actions that we are working against is the Southeast Supply Enhancement Project. And there's going to be a scoping comment party on June the 3rd at 6 p.m. that Appalachian Voices and others are hosting. And I will put that in the chat. And also, as far as connected to the carbon plan, Duke Energy wants to have more gas at the Roxborough Steam Station and also the Marshall plant close to Charlotte. And so there's going to be a canvassing in the Person County area that the Appalachian Voices 7 Directions is working on, and I will include that also in the chat. So, as I said, a lot going on. And so now it is my honor to introduce the awesome Adam Colette. I predict we have a lot of people here who love trees in our forest, right? Yes. And maybe many of you have heard of the Dogwood Alliance, I predict, hopefully. And if not, you're going to hear more about it from the awesome Adam. I am so grateful for the work of Dogwood Alliance, where Adam has worked for 10 years. He is the program director with a passion for organizing people and challenging corporations like Terrible Enviva and Drax and more, whose practices destroy our earth. He began his nearly 20-year career in advocacy as a student climate organizer at UNC Asheville. Yay! Since then, Adam has worked around the world to shut down coal plants, protect our beautiful forests, support public water systems, and build a new economic models. Thanks so much to Adam for joining us today. Take it away, Adam.
All right. Thank you so much, Karen. And I have to, I am. I'll give a little bit of context before I fully introduce myself. But just to note, I have been away for the past week on some dealing with family issues, and I got back like an hour and a half ago. So I'm still in my white t-shirt travel, but I'm excited to be here. I don't have much of a presentation. I have some slides that I can pull up, but Karen told me I had 8 minutes tops to speak to leave plenty of time for questions. So I'm going to be very brief. But I was excited. I have just loved working with Karen and Joe and some of you over the past years. And so when Karen asked me to do this, I'm very excited about it. So again, I'm Adam Colette. I'm the program director at Dogwood. Like was said, I've been there 10 years. I've been working in the environmental climate movement for nearly 20. And I'm originally from Southeast Kentucky. So I grew up in southeastern Kentucky, about 10 miles from my local mountaintop removal site. So I was I was kind of my parents were organizers and social workers, and so I've been around the organizing grassroots world pretty much my entire life. So I'm very excited about Third Act and Bill's project and the staff that they've assembled there. So just congratulations to all of you for taking this on and for attending these meetings. I think it's such an important constituency in our collective work to limit the impacts of climate change, to advance environmental justice, to protect democracy, and all the wonderful interconnected and issues that we're all working together on. So just thank you for showing up here and as often as you do, and for the work that you do. So really quick, I did see some hands for Dogwood, but we've been around for since 1996. I don't know how long that makes us. We're coming up on 30 years. Our mission right now is to advance environmental justice and climate action by mobilizing diverse voices to protect southern forests and communities from industrial logging. Dogwood, for those that aren't familiar, we're a regional organization. I think in brief, we work to protect forests from industrial logging and communities. We operate regionally in the U.S. South. Now, the U.S. South is the world's largest wood producing region. You may or may not know that. We produce more wood products out of the U.S. South than anywhere else in the world. And what makes Dogwood unique is we really focus on challenging the industrial logging industry directly. That is kind of our main focus. So we're not a land conservancy. They also do wonderful work protecting forests, but we don't conserve land. And we primarily, because we are regionally focused in the U.S. South, we primarily do not focus on public land, which most forest protection organizations really do, because there's a lot more ways to challenge logging and industry on public land. But 90%, nearly 90% of the forests in the U.S. South are privately owned. And so one of the reasons that we are in the world's largest wood producing region is because, as we say at Dogwood, it's kind of like the wild, wild west of logging, because on private land, there's little to no regulations on what can be done on a forest, or there's even that they have to announce that they're clear cutting or anything of that nature. And so Dogwood plays this really unique voice as being the only major regional organization that is singularly focused on limiting and addressing the impacts from industrial logging in the world's largest wood producing region. So that makes our work for the past nearly 30 years really, really critical. So we have a couple of different issues that we work on. Karen, we have run, and that I want to touch on just kind of 3 areas and give some updates. I don't know if I'll have time for that, but I want to just touch on a couple of different areas. But one of the main ones we have a long-running campaign for the past 10 years challenging the growth of the industrial biomass industry. So this is an industry that very much has impacts in North Carolina and across the South. And in very, very, very brief terms, what it is that we are clear cutting and logging our southern forests. We're taking them and shipping them in trucks or on trains to these wood pellet mills, which are highly toxic. They're placed primarily in environmental justice communities, where the communities are facing severe impacts. The wood there is processed into these little wood pellets. They look like rabbit food, and they're processing millions and millions of tons of these a year. Then they're putting them on trucks or trains, and they're shipping them to the ports. Here in North Carolina, it's in Wilmington, or up in Chesapeake, Virginia. They're putting them on big old ships then, and they're shipping them over to Europe, countries like the United Kingdom, or England, Denmark, Netherlands, France, and then also now over to China and South Korea. They're putting them over there, then they're putting them on more trucks and more trains, and then they're shipping them to big power stations, and then they're burning them, and they're incinerating them. And all of that is considered a solution to climate change. All of that is considered both carbon neutral and a solution to climate change. Why, you may ask? Well, trees are considered a renewable resource. And if you cut down a tree, say one grows back, and that makes it all fine and dandy. Well, clearly it's not. Big biomass is bad for our forests, our climate, and our communities. And Dogwood has had a long-running campaign to stop this. We've had some enormous successes in limiting the growth of the industry over these past 10 years, and we have a long way to go. I'm assuming you might have some questions about that, but I would say basically, before I get to our successes and where our focus is at right now and what you can do about it, basically, you may consider, why are we doing that? Why is that? And I say, because trees are renewable. I will also say because we don't necessarily value nature. And we often forget about nature also in the fight against climate change. You know, I am all for getting off of fossil fuels. We need to do that as soon as absolutely possible. And the brand of fossil fuels are bad and renewables are good is very strong. And everybody's kind of bought into that. But we also have to remember that even if we get off 100% of fossil fuels tomorrow, which is an absolutely good thing, we still only get essentially halfway to the Paris Climate Agreement. The other whole half is actually removing carbon from the atmosphere that has been there. And the best, absolute best technology that we have to do that is nature. And often when people think about nature, they think about forests. And so it is important to get off the reliance of fossil fuels, but the protection and the valuation of nature as it is a critical piece that we cannot forget about in the fight to address climate change. And when we do that, we get things like we want to get off fossil fuels, but we start burning trees in their place because we consider it carbon neutral. So we've had a number of successes. I think I probably have just 1 or 2 more minutes here. We've had a number of successes. The company Enviva, who operates 4 of these wood pellet mills in North Carolina, they're logging thousands of acres, probably, I forget, 160 acres every single day of forests that are going to these pellets in North Carolina, 160 acres a day. That are going to these pellets in North Carolina. We've been campaigning against them for years, and we've helped to successfully drive them. They just announced they filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy here in a little bit. But our main, and we've changed policies in Europe, I'll say our main focus right now is basically saying, don't make the same mistake as Europe. Hey, Biden administration, the US here, don't make the same mistake as Europe. Because of the recent IRA, the Inflation Reduction Act, the infrastructure bill, there's lots of new subsidies that could potentially incentivize a growth of bioenergy here domestically as we continue to transition off of fossil fuels slowly, too slowly, but we continue to transition off of fossil fuels, we could see more transition to things like biomass. And so there's lots of new subsidies on the federal level and the state level that we are challenging for new biomass facilities, for things like aviation biofuels, burning trees to power our airplanes, on things like carbon capture and storage, which if you work in oil and gas, they're saying they're going to burn the biomass and then they're going to capture the carbon underground. And so that's our main focus. I'll put some links to some actions in the chat where you can take and read a little bit more about big biomass subsidies on the federal level. And here in North Carolina, we work with a group of communities called the Impacted Communities Against Wood Pellets, and we are working with them to encourage and pressure North Carolina Department of Environmental Quality to clean up and place dust plans on these facilities. So there's so much more to say. There's so much more to learn about, but that's kind of a major focus. We're also doing some really amazing stuff with conservation, but I'm clearly over my time. 8 minutes goes really fast. Thank you for letting me speak so quickly, and I'd love to answer some questions.
Great. Okay, thank you, Adam. You've done a wonderful job, and I'm sure there probably are a lot of questions. What we'd like you to do when you have a question, since there are, too many people to be able to see their hands like this. So please go use the reaction button at the bottom of your screen. So you can ask a question of Adam.
Yeah, Webb.
Do you have, oh, I'm sorry.
So I'm just starting up my,
Web. Mhm.
it's taking a moment, but you can hear my voice. You said that
Mhm.
the big companies are saying they want to burn fuels, biomass, and then sequester the carbon under the ground. I don't understand that process. To me, when you burn anything that has to do with carbon, then you've got to release it into carbon dioxide. So are they talking about recapturing it someplace else, or is there some way of getting energy from the biomass and then keeping the carbon from going in the air?
I do not know the engineering behind it, but this is also something carbon capture and storage, or CCS, as you'll see it commonly referred to, is a technology that has, they've been talking about for decades. And the oil and gas industry is also very much excited about CCS. And there's a lot of investment in the technology. And I mean, again, Webb, it's a great question. An engineer could answer it more accurately than I could. But my understanding is that they do burn the fuel, or they create the energy. Like in biomass, they would burn the fuel, oil and gas. And then I don't know if it doesn't release or smokestack, but they remove the carbon and they pump it underground. They pump it underground into these, whatever secured underground location. It sounds like something out of the X-Files, but it's never been done successfully at any large scale. But we waste billions of dollars around the world. Billions and billions of dollars have been wasted looking into this because of an inability to get off of fossil fuels. I'll place a blog that we wrote in the chat on when we talk about CCS and bioenergy. They often call it BECCS, bioenergy carbon capture and storage. But carbon capture and storage in and of itself is kind of the bigger issue. So it's a great question. I wish I could answer it more technically. Yeah, we'll do Rich and then Minta.
Just want to agree with what you're saying, Adam. I'm an engineer, and I have studied these means of capturing carbon dioxide and other gases, and they are extraordinarily expensive and inefficient. And we are probably 20 years away from making any of them economical.
Yeah, thanks, Rich.
Minta?
Yeah, thank you. Great presentation and cause. I'm just curious about the private ownership and how you're lobbying or making it economically feasible. And I guess another question is I'm a bit surprised that EU with all their promotion of environmental shifting to renewable energies, how they're kind of misguided by the wood pellets as a renewable. So those two questions, how do you educate or lobby, enlighten, and kind of prevent?
Yeah, Minta, that's a great question that we could spend hours on, especially because that I would say very broadly, and I'll get to the landowner dynamics, but very broadly, what you find in industrial logging industry is there has been a very, very effective kind of greenwashing messaging campaign over decades, painting industrial logging as sustainable forest management. You think of we replant, trees grow back, we are managing a forest, terms like healthy forest. You'll often see figures like the amount of forest land in the US South is growing. A lot of this is misleading. One thing I tell people always is it's all the devils are in the details. So often, if you walk out into a 100-acre clear cut in eastern North Carolina and they've just left it alone, that is still considered forest. You could clear cut 200 acres and you could walk out in it, there's nothing there, that would still be counted on paper as forest. So as long as they didn't develop on it or change to another use. So the way in which we hide the impacts from logging is really detrimental. And that gets to the point, that is also why a country like the EU thought that sourcing wood from the US, where they are concerned with legality, so you think of illegal logging in Indonesia or illegal logging in Brazil, all of the logging here is very legal. It's very difficult to challenge that. So in terms of private land ownership, and I'll be quick here because we could talk about this for a while. In terms of private land ownership, I think it's the stance of Dogwood that, we have oftentimes pigeonholed forest landowners into the only option that they have to quote unquote manage their manage their land is place it into commercial management. So from a policy perspective across the board, we need to be providing, and if we're thinking about climate change or resiliency from storms and flooding, we need to be giving landowners more options to keep their forests standing, and focusing our tax credits and incentives in that direction, rather than incentivizing landowners to often place their land into a commercial management plan, which gets them a tax break in North Carolina. If you place your forest land into commercial timber management in North Carolina, you get a big break on your taxes. If you leave it alone, you don't get any break. So that's actually pigeonholing landowners into needing to log and essentially providing a roundabout subsidy to the logging industry. But they claim that it's keeping forests as forests. And that gets to what I mean. So I could talk about this for hours, but I'm going to recommend another thing, and I'll post it in here. I did some videos, and they're somewhat funny. They're kind of in like a Daily Show style. We call them Nature's News Desk. And there's some videos on our video page that actually go into a lot of these topics. And you can watch them on Dogwood's page. I'll post a link to our videos page, and you can scroll down to the Nature's News Desk videos and learn more there. Maybe, I don't know how much time we have. Somebody can check me on time, but happy to.
Yeah, you're doing fine. You're fine. Marcia?
Yeah, I hadn't really thought about logging here, because I moved here from Minnesota, so it's big up there too. And coming back from the beach about a couple weeks ago, I just was noticing all these big trucks full of logs. And I had a question about, so the process of making the wood pellets, what is it about that? So that is detrimental to the communities that it's happening in. So where are those communities, and what is it that it's doing to those communities as far as like the environment there?
Great question. So in North Carolina, I could maybe pull up a little presentation here, but in North Carolina, there are facilities in Hertford County, in Ahoskie. There's one in Northampton County outside in Garysburg. There's one in Robinson County, near Lumberton. And then there's one in Richmond County, near Dobbins Heights, or somewhat near Hamlet. So those are four, and those are all of those. I'm not actually sure about the Hartford, Ahoskie, but I know for a fact that Garysburg, Robinson, and Richmond County are all Tier 1 counties in terms of their health outcomes and impacts. They're all environmental justice counties. The facilities, it's mainly around air pollution. So the way that the chemicals that they use to compress the wood are very toxic. Acrolein, other what they call oh geez, I need my permit experts on here. But a lot of see, this is where I traveled today, and I'm not like in my hazardous organic compounds, HAPs, and VOCs, volatile organic compounds, and HAPs, hazardous air pollutants. We have more resources on this on our website, but most of it is air quality. And a lot of it too, what we're working on in North Carolina is the wood dust. So the communities that surround, they imagine if you had to power wash your house once every 2 weeks to just get dust off of it. Imagine if you put an air filter inside your home and it got clogged after a week of use with wood dust, and that you're breathing that and you're walking in and out. Anybody that sat around a campfire, honestly, for a night, you know, kind of like if you breathe in a bunch of campfire smoke, you know how that makes your lungs feel in the morning. That's the same. That's the same kind of stuff. We actually put air monitors. Just recently did a project with Clean Air Carolina and put air monitors outside some of these homes. And in 2 weeks, the air monitor was functioning at like 60% because it was too clogged to actually function in less than 2 weeks. It was too clogged with dust from the facilities. And so the truck traffic, the noise, and the air pollution are the main impacts from these facilities. Again, if you look on our videos page, there's actually videos from a lot of the North Carolina towns that'll give you good testimonials on that, or on our reports page on the website. Yeah, Karen?
Yeah, so Stephen in the comments said Enviva, because you mentioned how Enviva is now bankrupt, which sounds like it's good news, right? But they're still doing the terrible things. And so is there anything that we can do to, I know, to encourage the darn government to not give them the subsidies and not help them out of bankruptcy?
Yeah, well, you know, Chapter 11 bankruptcy is like, I think about it like witness protection program for corporations. You know, it's like the government goes and protects them from all their debtors. You know, I think Enviva is struggling. They are restructuring, you know, their facilities in North Carolina. What we can do is what we have been doing, which is making it so darn expensive for them to operate that they, you know, there still is a good chance that they don't survive financially. They're definitely restructuring. The facilities in North Carolina are established and not going away. But what we can is, you know, we can vote in November, and then we can really pressure new administrations to, you know, enact fugitive dust plans and place more regulations on these facilities, which they should and can be doing, that make it more expensive for them to operate. And then we're working right now, they're trying to expand in the Gulf for the Asian market. And so we're working with communities in Mississippi and Alabama to stop those facilities down there. Yeah, Rosemary, you're on mute.
What's the role of the people in communities who are most impacted by these things? What's their role in the organizing?
Front and center. So we have, you know, most of everything that we do bases off our regional network of partners. Dogwood is very driven by our community partners across the board. As I mentioned, in North Carolina, we have the Impacted Communities Against Wood Pellet Coalition. We work very closely with most of the groups in South Carolina, Georgia, pretty much everywhere there's a pellet facility, we have community leaders at the forefront. So, you know, our role at Dogwood is often a connector, you know, connecting communities on the front line to decision makers and people who can make a difference. We've been up to DC multiple times. We just hosted in March 21st, which was an International Day of Forest, an interagency briefing. We had 5 different federal agencies, Department of Energy, Department of Justice, EPA, CEQ, which is the Council on Environmental Quality, that's kind of like the White House's environmental workshop, and USDA on the ground in communities in North Carolina and South Carolina, which doesn't happen that often, meeting directly with impacted community members, trying to figure out ways. And that often becomes not just about stopping the facilities, but it becomes about economic development, it becomes about their quality of life, it becomes about you know, ways in which we can keep forests standing, create, you know, in often these places, they're recreation deserts. There's a lot of trees around, but no one has access to any of them because it's all privately owned, or it's the land ownership dynamics are still very tied up into historical roots in the U.S. South. And so So that their role is very prominent in the work that we do.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Can the Minta here, can the government start purchasing from private ownership economically and saving public forests?
Yeah, a public land expansion in the South is, in the West, they have tons of public land, and that's kind of the interaction. That's why we often hear about like forest fights of like, protect old growth on public lands kind of thing. But in the South, we don't have that luxury. I do out in Western North Carolina, but most of this happens along the coastal plain. So if you come in about 50 miles from the coast and you go, another like that 150-mile stretch there and wrap that from Virginia all the way down through the Gulf, that's where the logging is. That's where so much of it is. And all of that is in private ownership. I think there is a desire to have a push for an expansion of public lands in the South, but our forests are very young. Less than 10% of southern forests are older than 80 years, which is crazy when you think about how old trees can grow, and less than 10% of our forests are over 80 years in age. And so when we think about protecting old growth, or we think about like protecting beautiful places, we don't often think about protecting places that have been degraded. But in the context of climate change and resiliency, these are the areas that are going to be hit by climate change. There's also an enormous area for new carbon to be removed from the atmosphere if you let the forests grow and protect them and let nature do its thing, rather than just locking away the carbon. And so, we have to shift our thinking around that, but they are also very commodified, and there's a lot of vested interests in keeping them in rotating, pine plantations.
Well, Adam, thank you so much for speaking with us today. I learned a lot, and I'm sure everyone on this call has learned a lot. I forgot to say that I live in Asheville, North Carolina, and I'm very proud of Dogwood Alliance. So just to let you know, the follow-up email for this roundtable discussion will contain all of the links that are in the chat. So we'll be sending a follow-up email to recap, a lot of the things that were said. So don't worry about that. You'll be getting that. We really need for you to let us know how we're doing. So if you can put comments in the chat about how helpful this was, what resonated with you, what keeps you coming back, or what topics you'd like to hear about. And how are you leaving the meeting? Are you overwhelmed, or are you, getting hope from what we're talking about? So let us know all of this. This is, what we need to know in order to keep these roundtables going and pertinent to everyone that joins us. Okay, so we have decided that we're going to try to have our roundtables on a regular basis. So we're trying to schedule them for the fourth Tuesday of the month, if we can get our speakers on those days. So our next roundtable is scheduled for Tuesday, June 25th at 5:30. And also let us know about the time. Is this time a good one for you, or would you rather see something else? So thank you very much for coming. And we hope to see you on June 25th at 5:30. Thank you so much again. Bye-bye.
Bye. You want to recap for a minute or just get off, or?
Yeah, I don't mind. I was giving people They might need a chance to write something in the